Hi everyone! Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite bands, as you may be able to tell by the shirt. We're talking Weezer. Now, I've had the pleasure of spending the last 2 weeks listening to their discography to come up with the cream of the crop. I'm calling this, Undeniably, the top 10 best Weezer songs. And, to stir things up a little bit, I'll have my pick for an overrated song at the end. But in the meantime, let's get to the top 10. Following Weezer's resurgence with the Green Album, it seemed that nearly every record they released was billed as a comeback or return to form of their first 2 LPs. The band's 10th full-length, labeled The White Album, found chief songwriter and frontman Rivers Cuomo, drummer Patrick Wilson, rhythm guitarist Brian Bell, and bassist Scott Schreiner explicitly returning to their Golden State roots, aiming for what they referred to as a beach album. The group would hook up with Jake Sinclair to produce. The man who had turned Panic at the Disco from fueled by ramen mall punks into unlikely arena rockers, and who was such a diehard Weezer fan himself that he once was in a tribute band called Weezer. Jake and Rivers went through an intimidating backlog of 250 songs that Cuomo was sitting on to select tracks for the new record. From all that work though, only California Kids would make the cut. The song was initially released as California on a side project that Rivers had with Scott Murphy. The original version is pretty close to the reworked one, except for the fact that the majority of the lyrics were initially in Japanese. Cuomo would reshape the song with new Western lyrics, co-written by former Semisonic leader Dan Wilson, best known for their last call anthem, Closing Time. I know want to take me home. And who had become a big-name collaborator, most famously writing Adele's blockbuster weeper, Someone Like You. California Kids would be the first song demoed for the sessions, and served as the ecstatic jump-off for the record. Cuomo and Bell's wiry twin guitars strum hurriedly, along with Schreiner's deep low end and Wilson's energetic shuffle. On the verses, Rivers sings about being behind the 8 ball, before advising, "Don't you worry." Anthemic power chords ring out on the chorus, with cooing backup vocals, and on the massive hook, he declares, "California Kids will throw you a lifeline." The winning melody and the cowabunga spirit are infectious and inspiring, with the band sounding vintage after many had already left them for dead. California Kids kicked off their strongest album since the criminally underrated Maladroit, with a blast of sunshine. It's a spunky slice of Cali pop that sounded like Weezer turning back the clock. More so than a lot of other bands, there are Weezer fans that like to stick to one era of the band, typically skewed to their earlier records. It's understandable. The group released a ton of albums, and Rivers was never afraid to follow his muse, leading to records equal parts fascinating and frustrating. He was a proven ace with pop hooks, and while there is plenty of treasure to be found on every record, his quality control could leave something to be desired. Some tracks seem more like song exercises than enjoyable tunes, and I'm not sure anyone ever needed a Lil Wayne guest spot. I just imagine Cuomo thought Wheezy with Weezer was a fun idea. On the band's 6th record, once again self-titled and referred to as the Red Album, the quartet aimed for experimental. For the first time, all 4 members brought in their own songs and sang lead. Naturally, they aren't quite as good as the ones by Rivers. The record isn't as silly as the cover implies, but it is strange at times. Perhaps best exemplified by The Greatest Man Who Ever Lived, a bizarro epic that swings from rap rock verses to marching Celtic folk hymns. It's no surprise that when the band had previewed the LP with Geffen bigwigs, the label told them that they needed to record more commercial material. Rivers would leave the meeting angry, but ironically enough, it would inspire him to write their biggest hit from the Red Album. Pork and Beans is directly aimed at those head honchos. In the huge chorus, Rivers declares, "I'ma do the things that I wanna do. I ain't got a thing to prove to you." The hook is both incredibly catchy and written in an uncannily universal way, channeling all the righteous rage from anyone who has ever felt slighted or underestimated. The more laid-back acoustic sway of the verses only makes the Marshall stack explosion of the chorus hit that much harder. Pork and Beans is a cheeky middle finger to the haters, and a bold, defiant anthem of self-determination. You got your big G There was more than his thick-rimmed glasses and lyrics referencing Dungeons & Dragons that solidified Cuomo's nerd rock credentials. He was a bona fide scholar of pop music, sharpened by his times working at the legendary Tower Records in LA through reworking nostalgic classics on the Teal album. Rivers took music very seriously. When it came to writing music, he was very studious, always tinkering with different ways to create new songs. Over the years, he used various exercises to write, from utilizing spreadsheets to cut and paste lyrics, to incorporating streams of consciousness kept in his journal. He remained restless in the pursuit of new ideas. For Hashpipe, he would say that he wrote it after an unhealthy experiment, where he took a bunch of the ADHD med, Ritalin, along with 3 shots of tequila, and paced around his yard until inspiration struck, like Benjamin Franklin on a bender. This helps to explain why the lyrics are risque and bonkers. So much so that their label didn't even want to release Hashpipe as their lead single, preferring Don't Let Go. Still, the craziest thing about the song may be the fact that Rivers first offered it to rock legend Ozzy Osbourne. We can only imagine how heavy a version by the Ozman would have been. As Weezer's first release after a 5-year sabbatical, Hashpipe was a hard-rocking reintroduction. Riding a Neanderthal simple riff and a stomping rhythm, all of a sudden Weezer sounded downright dangerous. Rivers stretches his vocal range to cryptically sing in a falsetto about his boogies over the palm-muted verse, and on the pre-chorus he dares you to come at him, with the grinding riff becoming even more vicious. The harmonies in the chorus remind you of Cuomo's pop instincts, while the song's punk rock intensity seemed tailor-made to get the mosh pit throwing elbows. Filled with metallic buzzsaw guitars and throbbing subwoofer rattling bass, Hashpipe is a fist-pumping provocation that pushed the boundaries of the band. Weezer's re-emergence in the year 2000 would fittingly coincide with the expansion of internet access across the US, and the band would soon host a vibrant community of superfans on the message boards of their website. Before several social media companies monopolized much of the web, it wouldn't be uncommon to spend time with such niche forums. With a highly opinionated fan base right at their fingertips, the group came up with a novel approach for their 4th album, Maladroit. During sessions, Weezer would release newly recorded demos directly onto the site for fans to share their immediate feedback. It was an awesome experience for the ravenous fan base, collecting dozens of excellent demos that would never even end up on the record. For Rivers, though, it was a mixed bag. The commenters did come up with the album title and the cover, however, he ended up largely disagreeing with most of the fans' creative opinions. According to him, the posters chose the wackest songs and offered very little coherent, constructive criticism. The band would still specifically thank the fans in the liner notes, and it was a clever way to reward your fans and keep them engaged in the adolescent days of the internet, even if it didn't quite pan out like they meant it to. Maladroit would find the band further embracing a harder, heavy metal edge. Its best song, Keep Fishin', mixes crunchy guitars with a surfy, swinging rhythm for a joyful burst of pop. Its different sections are mind-bogglingly all earworms, bouncing from a catchy section to one even catchier. The boisterous call and response vocals on the pre-chorus reel you in before the chorus starts, backed by distortion-soaked power chords over a rollicking backbeat. Yet it's not quite finished, and from there it further evolves into a doo-wop influenced post-chorus where the band counters Rivers' melody with cooing backups. It's a multi-layered lasagna of hooks that magically feels lightweight and effortless. Perfectly paired with a silly video featuring Weezer and the Muppets getting into some hijinks, who knew Patrick Wilson was the band's heartthrob? Keep Fishin' is an infectious, impeccably crafted power pop rocker that lives rent-free in the minds of Weezer heads worldwide. Despite the rousing success of the Blue Album, Rivers quickly became disillusioned with the loneliness of a nomadic rock star life. Believing his songs were too simplistic, he decided to enroll at Harvard to study music academically. His original idea for Weezer's 2nd album would be a space opera entitled Songs from the Black Hole that would express his mixed feelings about the group's success. However, after recording some demos, he would quickly scrap the ambitions for the concept album, save some of the best songs he wrote, and start working on more personal, emotionally raw compositions for what would become their highly influential second album, Pinkerton. While away at college, Cuomo underwent a painful corrective surgery where the bone in his left leg was broken and a metal rod was inserted to slowly stretch that leg to the same height as his right one. This led to him being largely immobile most of the time, while also being mentally clouded by the opioids intended to kill the intense pain. Being confined to his room would give him plenty of time to write new material, and The Good Life would be inspired by his hermetic detachment from normal life. While he initially embraced the idea of living like a monk, soon enough he felt FOMO of the life he couldn't lead. On the verses, the slinky guitars dance along, with a ping-pong bass line and a stunted, responsive backbeat, while Cuomo is full of loathing, reveling in his self-pity. The tune gets more animated as the chorus approaches, until it finally explodes with ecstatic sing-along energy, as Rivers longs to ditch his walking cane, crooning, "I don't wanna be an old man anymore." While the lyrics are very specific, his overwhelming desire to get back to the good life is entirely relatable, and the carefree, slightly slappy arrangement makes the struggle to find your happy place inviting and invigorating. While it never became the single to save Pinkerton from being labeled a commercial failure, The Good Life is an incredibly sharp, winningly offbeat slice of alternative pop, still perfect for shaking booties and making sweet love all the night. The origins of the W can be traced back to 1989, when Rivers moved from Connecticut to Los Angeles with his high school heavy metal band, Avant Garde. They would implode shortly following the move, and Cuomo would meet drummer Patrick Wilson while working at Tower Records. The two would soon move in together, along with Wilson's buddy Matt Sharp. Rivers and Pat would start two bands that quickly dissolved, one with the incredible name 60 Wrong Sausages. Afterwards, the pair came up with a new band, with their roomie Sharp as the bassist, along with Jason Cropper as the second guitarist. They would adopt the name Weezer, based on a nickname that Rivers' father had given him. Their very first show in 1992 would see them share a bill with Keanu Reeves' band, Dogstar. Later that year, the group would record a demo entitled The Kitchen Tape, which would include several classic songs that would appear on their debut. Those rough sessions would find their way to Todd Sullivan, A&R man at Geffen Records, and earn them a major label deal. They would travel to Jimi Hendrix's famed studio, Electric Lady Studios, in New York City, to record what would become the Blue Album. During sessions, the band felt at odds with Jason Cropper, so he would be dismissed from the group, and all of his guitar parts would be redone by Rivers. Guitarist Brian Bell would then be brought in as his replacement. Bell wouldn't actually play any sixth string on the record, but he does join in on singing backup harmonies, including on Surf Wax America. In the studio, the band had practiced barbershop quartet-style songs, and their vocal melodies would be a key component that set the album apart from their contemporaries. The song would also be inspired by the Beach Boys, another group of pale, Southern California kids who had never picked up a surfboard in their lives either. A fast guitar riff cues up the song, as Pat's drums move from a steady bass drum kick to a punky rush of snare and cymbals. On the chorus, Rivers bellows, His lyrics are slightly tongue-in-cheek, as he promotes his surfer lifestyle, but the surging energy is so frothy, it's hard not to get swept up in the current. The song stops abruptly for the brilliant harmonizing on the bridge, as Sharp and Bell repeat the refrain, "And when you're out of fuel, I'm still afloat." Perfect for a brief audience sing-along before the careening drums and powerful guitars rush back in to carry us to its dramatic conclusion. It was no wonder that Surf Wax America was originally the band's go-to closer. It's a ripping song with fantastic dynamics, sweet harmonies, and a hang 10 tidal wave rhythm. When Pinkerton was released, it didn't just sell poorly, it was harshly treated as a disaster. Rolling Stone readers voted it as the third worst album of the year, and no one took that as hard as Rivers. The next year, he would say he was embarrassed by the record, even retroactively calling the Blue Album a fluke hit because of the Buddy Holly video. When they came back in the spotlight in 2001, Cuomo decried the cult that surrounded Pinkerton, calling the record diseased and hideous, shamefully relating it like getting drunk at a party and making a fool of yourself. It would take nearly a decade for Pinkerton to be reappraised and lauded as the fantastic, unique record it is, with Cuomo finally feeling vindicated around 2008. The record's raw, visceral sound was a true revelation, but more than anything, the lyrics were the most influential aspect. Unbeknownst to Rivers, he would basically be the architect of what would become known as emo. His detailed, occasionally straight-up ugly feelings were on full display, and the adolescent emotions would resonate with throngs of young adults. Even if some of his words could be cringeworthy, there was an authentic bravery in singing them openly. On El Scorcho, cheekily named after a fast food chain's hot sauce, Cuomo's words detailed his romantic obsession with a classmate he knows very little about. The verses are a jumbled inner monologue, seemingly ripped from his journal, trying to sort himself out over a winding circular riff and a stilted, seesawing rhythm. The chorus erupts in a full-throated screaming of his imagined pickup line. I'm alive like you, so please, hello. Like his emotions, the arrangement is dark, disheveled, and bipolar. On the bridge, the tempo picks up, and Rivers and Brian trade vocals, as if our narrator's internal voices are shouting over each other. That ends with him picturing his crush, telling him what he wishes to hear. Maybe scared to say, I'm falling for you. So confessional, it's almost voyeuristic. El Scorcho is an off-kilter rocker with a dangerously catchy and cathartic chorus that's both nakedly personal and utterly universal. While Undone the Sweater Song was a buzzworthy alternative hit, Buddy Holly was the smash single that really caused Weezer to blow up, and subsequently give Rivers a serious case of imposter syndrome. Cuomo didn't even think the song was worthy of being on the Blue Album, calling it cheesy and thinking it didn't really fit in with the rest of the LP. Producer Rick Ocasek would be the champion for the song, encouraging the band to record the tune and eventually persuading Rivers to include it. Buddy Holly wouldn't have become a true sensation without Spike Jonze's whimsical video featuring Weezer time-traveling to perform the tune on the old sitcom Happy Days. The kitschy throwback vibe meshed so well with the song's upbeat energy that it really struck a nerve. The clip got heavy rotation and won multiple awards from both Billboard and MTV. The video's success would sour Rivers on silly treatments for singles. So much so that the next two singles from the group, Say It Ain't So and El Scorcho, would be statically basic, as to only focus on the song itself. Still, the video would never have been a big hit if the song itself wasn't stellar, and Buddy Holly is a concise, massively addictive pop masterclass. While it sounds like a head-over-heels love song, it was actually written about a platonic female friend. She was Korean, and Rivers witnessed insensitive guys making fun of her English accent. The chorus was his jovial attempt to cheer her up, comparing her to American sweetheart Mary Tyler Moore. The song starts suddenly, with a wall of beefy guitars, as Rivers asks, "What's with these homies dissing my girl?" with the heavy distortion contrasting with the lightweight keyboard line. The cooing harmonies of the pre-chorus make clear Rivers isn't concerned with those jerks, and the band launches into the catchy, carefree refrain with gusto, declaring, "I don't care what they say about us anyway, I don't care about that." The band's peppy drive and his cocksure confidence is the perfect encouragement to ignore the bullies. Buddy Holly is an effervescent earworm, full of undeniable charm that introduced many to the wonderful world of Weezer. Buddy Holly wasn't the only song that producer Rick Ocasek fought the band to release. Rivers wasn't sure if Island in the Sun's chipper, sparkling clean production fit in with the rest of the Green album, and didn't plan to include it. Ocasek would again press the issue. It's a good thing he reconsidered. It would become the band's biggest international hit. As a writer of multiple top 10 hits with his group, The Cars, it made sense to take his advice. Rick's influence on Weezer's sound could hardly be overstated. He worked with Rivers to craft their ideal blend of heavy power pop on the Blue album, and while they self-produced Pinkerton, he would be called back into duty with their return on the Green album. And because everything seemingly requires a trilogy of sorts, they would even reunite a third time on Weezer's very solid 9th album, Everything Will Be Alright at the End. Ocasek had a knack for bringing out some of the best from Cuomo and co. Their chemistry was amazing. After a long 4-year break following Pinkerton's disappointing release, Rivers had amassed a staggering amount of songs. He had written well over 100, and the group would demo 75 of them before sessions for the Green Album even started. So perhaps it wasn't surprising that Rivers didn't immediately see Island in the Sun as a standout. With so much material, it's easy to get a little lost in the forest. Ocasek would instruct the group to play the chord progression for Island in the Sun on repeat for the group to hone in on the correct feel. The swaying guitar chords perfectly dance with the chilled out rhythm of Patrick Wilson's simple shuffle and one album member Mikey Welsh's nimble bass lines. Over the warm atmosphere, even the silly nonsense singing feels perfectly in place. The lyrics, like most of the Green Album, are direct and simple, romantically dreaming of an escape to a paradise with his love. It's incredibly difficult to write a happy song that doesn't seem corny. Island in the Sun's delicate chorus is so blissful that it feels honest. The bridge lets the guitars rip for a few seconds, switching it up for good measure as Rivers passionately plans for the lover's getaway, ending with the hopeful promise, "We'll never feel that anymore." As the tune returns to its pleasant waves, it starts fading out, only to accent the song's optimistic, daydreaming mystique. Island in the Sun is an eternally sunny slice of pop perfection that feels as pleasant as a summer breeze. It's no shocker that the group's greatest song would be from their debut. I'm sure that to a good amount of viewers, I didn't put enough songs from the Blue Album on this list. It's really kind of crazy how on their first album, Weezer was already fully formed and simultaneously at their best. I have to believe part of this was Rivers really bringing his A-game, working with a bona fide rock and roll legend in Rick Ocasek. The young band really had a vision themselves though, insisting on rules for the sessions, including banning reverb and only allowing downstrokes on guitars. They created a unique concept to act as if the guitars and bass were a unified 10-string instrument. The result made the guitars massive, which made a fantastic sweet and sour contrast between the catchy pop melodies and the distorted guitar thunder. The heaviness would also accent the bubbling pubescent emotions behind the songs. Say It Ain't So would be written about a teenage freakout when Rivers discovered beer in his refrigerator. This led him down a hysterical spiral. His biological father was an alcoholic who had abandoned his family when he was only 4 years old. Seeing the booze and now living with his stepfather, he immediately feared the same fate. Those hormonal high school years have a way of heightening every single experience as if it's the end of the world. His mother and stepfather remained together, but his memories of the incident would inspire his finest song. It starts off with an iconic, slinky riff, before the band jams with an almost reggae rock on the verses, with calm, restrained bass from Matt Sharp and a soft bop from Patrick Wilson. Rivers sings in a sweet tenor. Somebody's cold one is giving me chills. While the tempo is laid back, you could sense his anxiety. Right before the chorus starts, you get a warning with swelling feedback bleeding out, before the guitars stomp the distortion pedal and wallop your ears with the dramatic power chords. Cuomo finally unloads his trembling psyche, howling with a primal intensity, working through the past trauma of his dad deserting his family, manifest in a range of conflicting emotions that drive the amazing soft and loud passages, from eerie quiet calmness to boiling in the red rage. On the bridge, he screams, "The sun is coming in the night," before his feelings overwhelm him, and he channels his grief in an intense electric solo. The emotional rawness is universally relatable, as we empathize with his struggle and commiserate together on the thrilling refrain. It's a cliche to say great art is always inspired by pain, but there are countless examples to why there is some truth to that thought. On Say It Ain't So, Rivers channeled a traumatic childhood experience to create an anxious, angry, alternative rock anthem full of burning melodrama. With emotionally honest lyrics, a catchy, cathartic chorus, and incredible, explosive dynamics, it's Weezer at their very best. And now, I'll add 2 more songs that almost made the list. If you want to destroy my sweater. Of course, I have to include at least 1 more song off the Blue Album. I eagerly await comments for excluding Only in Dreams. My apologies. Some tough choices had to be made. Undone was actually the first Weezer song that Rivers wrote. He would say that he was really into the Velvet Underground, and this was his attempt to write a song in their vein. However, years later, he would realize he actually cribbed the riff from a Metallica song. Undone isn't heavy metal, but the overdriven guitars are powerful and deliver a punch, and it was the perfect introduction to Weezer's blend of chunky chords and catchy hooks. Rivers picks out a hypnotic serpentine riff. Sharp bass lines hum on the low end, and Wilson plays a plodding, common time shuffle. All the while, silly spoken dialogue about an after party fill in between the interludes, as if listening to chatter with the band performing live right in front of you. The verses are short and simple, designed to get to the earworm chorus as fast as possible. The song wittily equates a sweater unraveling with the narrator losing his mind. Over distorted guitars crying out, he yells, "Lying on the floor, I've come undone." The song ends with an epic, swelling crescendo as Rivers, Matt, and Brian echo the verse melody, only this time with nonsense vocalizing, adding to the quirky vibe. On their debut single, Weezer showed why they were top of the class in the 90s alternative. Undone, the sweater song, is a wacky power pop gem that still hits hard. The Blue Album will always hold a special spot in my heart for being the first CD I ever purchased with my own money. However, if pressed, I would probably say Pinkerton edges it out as Weezer's best album. From the stomping, noisy Tired of Sex through the breathtaking, delicate Butterfly, the album's lo-fi angst cuts to Rivers' core, all while still being sharply written. Get You was one of the songs originally from the planned rock opera Songs from the Black Hole. It's probably a good thing it was cast aside. I'm not sure many would have been on board for a record with a high-concept, space-themed love triangle. But I'm glad the song was rescued and resurrected for the Pinkerton sessions. A laser beam guitar slide viciously kicks off the song, and during the verses, the bass throbs along with an off-kilter beat. The catchy refrain is simply the title, with some added attitude. The band's dark drive makes it sound like a warning. Our narrator is on the edge and willing to do anything. Get You is a visceral, nasty ripper that made the nerd rockers sound positively menacing, and it deserves to be mentioned among their best. Beverly Hills, Beverly Hills. There's some cruel irony that Weezer's most successful song is one of their worst. Beverly Hills is the only song from the lads to make the Billboard Top 10. While other songs may garner more radio play these days, none came close to those initial sales. The weird thing is, even when it came out, Beverly Hills was roundly denounced by their fans. It honestly seemed like a song meant for anyone but Weezer's fiercest fans. The song is so broad and dumb, it was always intended for the lowest common denominator of listeners. Catnip for the bros. Their sixth album, Make Believe, was definitely a calculated effort to appeal to the mainstream by doling down their idiosyncratic impulses. Outside of a lame cash grab, it's a wonder why they even bothered. The band was never going to be deemed cool. Their bespectacled nerd rock had long made them outsiders to the rock scene at the time. The group's music would never fit in next to Korn and Limp Bizkit, yet they still had some desperation to be relevant. They would recruit producer guru Rick Rubin for Make Believe, most likely due to his modern rock hits from System of a Down and Audioslave. The results range from boring to just plain bad. We Are All on Drugs is easily among the most forgettable, brain-dead songs the band has ever laid to tape. We are all on drugs, yeah. Beverly Hills is somehow even worse. It's remarkable that Rivers would at one point claim it to be his proudest moment. The man has written some amazing tunes. This is not one of them. On the verses, he rap-sings lyrics about lifestyles of the rich and famous, all delivered with a wink, as if he's being clever, but it passes the cringe line to being straight cornball. The basic crunchy riff, taken from a Rivers demo a decade earlier, had been collecting dust for a reason. There's not much spark to it. The chorus sounds gigantic, but the hook is so weak, and it's only made worse by the trashy, gimme gimme female vocals that only get more grating with their constant repetition. Add in some gratuitous talkbach wankery, and it turns into a parody of the group. They could claim it was some kind of in-joke, but at best, it's an eye-rolling dad joke, cheesier than Velveeta. Beverly Hills is an all-style, no-substance groaner, from a songwriter who should know better. If I was Rivers, I would be slightly embarrassed that it was Weezer's biggest hit. If he ever wonders why people consistently underrate his songwriting acumen, this is ground zero as to why. Feel free to like it in some kind of detached, ironic way, but if Beverly Hills comes on the radio, I'm changing the station. For me, it's overrated. Want to be something I don't know what. Weezer's 8th album, Hurley, their first independent record after leaving Geffen, is a pretty odd one. Not simply because it was named after a character from Lost, a dated reference that was never going to age well, but also because Rivers wrote the majority of songs with a strange, eclectic list of co-writers. This would include the frontwoman from 4 Non-Blondes, the bassist from No Doubt, and even the dude who wrote Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer, and Ricky Martin's Livin' La Vida Loca. Yes, remarkably, that was one guy. With all the cooks in the kitchen, the record is unsurprisingly a hodgepodge, and comes off like the band in a bit of an identity crisis. The best song from the sessions, I Wanna Be Something, would be included as a bonus track on the deluxe edition of the LP, and is really the antithesis of most of the record. Written by only Rivers, it simply features him singing over a dusty acoustic guitar, like he propped a microphone up in his bedroom. With no other instrumentation at all, it's a folky, vulnerable stunner, where he earnestly lays bare his smoldering desire to make his mark, plainly singing, I want to be something before I die. His fragile tenor brings chills, and it's hard not to be won over by his blunt sincerity. I'll never know why it didn't actually make the proper track list of Hurley, but I Wanna Be Something is a B-side that deserves more love. If you haven't heard it, you should add it to your playlist. So there you have it. That was undeniably the top 10 best Weezer songs. So, how wrong was I? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your list look like? Do you think Beverly Hills is one of their best songs? Let me know. And if there's any songs I missed, let me know in the comments below. Hope you stick around, and thank you for watching. Panic at the Disco from Cuomo's Nerd Rock. Cuomo's Nerd Rock. Are mind-boggling, but he just joined in. I don't know how that turned into that.